Hello, in this video we're going to talk about list comprehension in Python. So if some of you might remember that in one of our assignment you were asked to return a new list. Well, you're given a list and then you are asked to return a new list with every element in the original list doubled. So I think most of you did something like that. I pulled that from the instructor solution. Basically, given the list, we create a new list. And then, so for every number in the original list, we just double that number, 2 times that number, and append that to the new list. And then at the end, we return the new list, right? So that's what we did. And this is what I have here. So if I just run it, it's basically double what's in the original list, right? So shouldn't be any surprise here. Now, so as it turns out, I mean, a lot of times we actually do this quite a bit. That, given a list, we do something with each element in the list, and then we put the results in a new list. So since this happens so often, Python actually has a very succinct way to do it, and this is kind of fairly unique to Python. In languages like C++ or Java, they don't have something like this. Now, so in order to understand that, first we have to understand what's really the important part of this task that we're asked to perform. So basically, I point out here there are two important parts to this function here. Okay, so the first important part is we're iterating through a list, right? So basically, we have this thing for all the numbers in the list. So that's for what element, right? And the second important part is what do we do with that element? And in this case, we multiply that element by 2. We double the element. So those are really the important part of this whole operation. The rest of them is kind of just just create a new list and then put the result in the new list and return the new list. Those are kind of what I would say, kind of boilerplate code that you basically have to do regardless whether you're writing a double function, triple function, or some other functions. So, but the important part are these two parts. What are we going through, and what are we doing with each element as we go through the sequence? Okay, so the Python way, or the succinct Python way of doing this is what's called list comprehension, and it looks like that. And it basically just takes the two important parts that I just highlighted. The first part is kind of the what to do with at each step, right? And then the second part is what sequence are we going through? Okay, so let me write this out and show you how it works. So I'm going to define double2 integers, and then we are going to return. So we're going to return a new list. So I start with the the syntax for a new list, and then what we're going to do, this might be a little counterintuitive. I'm going to double the number for the number in integers. Oops, integers. Okay, and let me run that. I am going to print out 2. Okay, so if all goes well, I should get exactly the same result as before, and that's what we have. All right, so again, just keep keep this in mind, that the important thing is what do we do with each element, and then where the elements are from, which sequence are they from. So those are the that's how you turn, and at least most simple loops into a list comprehension. Okay, so this is the general syntax. It's basically you start with the square bracket again for as you would create a list, and then the first thing in this inside the square bracket is the expression that you want to do. Second part is which item or which element, probably should put say element, in what sequence. A couple important things to know is that the expression, it's a singular, so there you can only put a single expressions there, so you can't really do very complicated operations on the elements. Or if you want to do something complicated, you can put a function here, right? So a function call will be an expression, but a single expression. Okay. The second thing is this creates a new list. Okay, it's a new list. It does not change what's in the sequence. Okay, it creates a new list, and then that new list just contains all the evaluated results of the expression. All right, so that's that. You've seen an example, and now your turn. Pause the video and do these two problems. So the first problem is really just use a list comprehension to print hello world, or print something 1,000 times. Okay, and the second problem is just slightly more complicated. Write a list comprehension to print numbers from 0 to 1,000, I guess exclusive. Okay, so try those two problems out. One hint, if you're like kind of still scratching your head how to approach this, is you might want to write a for loop version for these problems first, which should then be very easy, right? And then go through what I show here is like figure out what you want to do, and then basically put the for loop here in the second half of the list comprehension. Okay, so give this a try. All right, assuming that you've done it, I'm going to do this just very quickly. So now, so to do the first one, print hello 1,000 times. So I'm going to start with the list, and I'm just going to print hello. Okay, so how do you do something 1,000 times in a for loop? Well, you can do for I in range 1,000, right? If you remember from your the loop lesson. So now, because I'm really not even using I in my expression here, and hopefully you remember this. If I don't care about the I, well, I can leave the I in there, or I can signify the fact that I really don't care about the element in the list by just putting an underscore here. That basically says I don't care, whatever it's in the sequence. I just want to do this 1,000 times. So let me print this. Okay. It's kind of hard to prove that I did this exactly 1,000 times, but trust me, I did it 1,000 times. Okay. So the second problem is just print the number from 0 to 1,000. So basically very similar to what I did before, but now I actually want the number in the sequence, right? So I would actually put the I back in this one, and then I'll just print out the I here. Okay. Let me comment this out. So I'm gonna run this, and there it goes from 0 to 999. So yeah, that's that, and this actually shows one thing that that's kind of slightly different from the previous example, and that is basically, I mean, this This it doesn't even have to be an expression. It could be a statement that actually, you know, print something out. Right? It doesn't necessarily have to evaluate to a number. And as a matter of fact, one interesting to see to look at is, so print. What does print actually evaluate to? What does it actually return? And to actually see that, we can try this. Try to print out whatever this list ends up being. So if we run this, it will print that 1,000 times because that's what print does. And then if you print out the result of the list comprehension, this list comprehension, it's basically 1,000 nones. And the reason for that is print, basically it doesn't return anything, which means it returns none. Okay, so that would explain that. All right. Yeah, I think that's what these slides are trying to say here. So that's that. Okay, more exercise for you. Now, so this next one is given a list of words, write a list comprehension to return a list of the first letter of each of the words. All right, so give that a try. Okay, so let's see how we actually do that. Oh, I don't have a list of words here, so let me quickly write up one. Now, sun, moon, earth, bars, whatever. Okay, so how do we get the first letter of each of these words? So I am going to maybe for this one, I'm going to quickly show how to do it in a loop, which you should be should be able to do very quickly, and how to do it in a list comprehension. So basically, just to print out the first letter of each word in a loop. So I can say for word in words, I can print out. Sorry, blanking out. Print out the word, the first letter of the word. There. Right. That's really that. And I run it. The first letter of each word, S, M, E, and M again. All right. So how do you turn this into a list comprehension? Well, actually, how do you wait? I say return a list. So yeah, okay. So we start as usual that with the loop itself. Okay, I'm going to turn this into a list. Okay, and then I'm going to take what I want to do with each of the word and put it inside the list comprehension at the beginning, basically. So that would give me a list of the first letter of each word, and I can print it out. And there, S, M, E, and M. Okay. And that's what this thing is. Next thing I want to emphasize is I know it's called list comprehension, and I know all the examples that we've shown so far are operating on lists, but this thing doesn't have to be a list, right? It can be any sort of sequence, such as a string. Remember, a string is just a sequence of little strings. Each characters, really, it's a sequence of characters. So you can do list comprehension with strings, such as for C, well, C for C in, let's say, hello world. If I print that out, basically each time around the loop, quote unquote loop, C is going to take on just one letter at a time, and I'm just going to put that letter in a list. So run that. Yeah, basically it creates a list of each letter from the string. Okay, and one more thing that I kind of want to point out, the list comprehension can actually get really maybe not really, but it can get more complicated and more powerful / useful with, for example, conditions. So you can actually have optionally have a condition at the end of a list comprehension. So, and it would only evaluate the expression if the condition is true. Okay, so as an example of that, we can say, how do we well, okay, so how do we print out the number from kind of or how do we construct a list for numbers between 0 and 10? Well, we can do I for I in range 10, right? And we print that out. That should give us a list of 0 through 9, right? Now, if we just want the even numbers in this list, and remember, even number is when we modulo 2 and it's 0. So we can just say if I modulo 2 is 0. So it would go through all the numbers. It will put I, in 0. I would take on the value 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on until 9. Now it would only put the I in the list if I modulo 2 is 0. So, and if I run that, it shows me, all the even numbers. Now this is an optional topic, but I thought to show it because it could be useful. It could be useful, but you're not going to be held responsible for knowing this just yet. Okay, and yes, and there are other things that you can actually do with the list comprehension, like double list comprehension and things like that. So it can get really kind of complicated, but also useful. All right, so one more thing I want to point out with the list comprehension is, in a way, it kind of looks like list multiplication. Right, so if you remember list multiplication, let's say I have a list and then I multiply it 10 times. That basically means well, it's kind of like concatenating 10 of this kind of list, right? So I end up with number of threes, 10 threes in a list. So you can do exactly the same thing with list comprehension, right? And all that you're doing is, so I'm just going to put the number 3 in the list for I don't care about I don't really care about what's in the sequence. I just want to do it 10 times. So underscore here. And then every time I'm going to put a 3 in the list. So that should give me exactly the same thing. Okay, so list multiplication and list comprehension, in this case, they do the same thing. But obviously, you can do a lot more than what list multiplication can do, right? So for a quick example, you've seen this, if I change this to sorry, let me just do another one. If I put an I in here, and then I can put a different number for each element of the list, right? It's 0, 1, 2 through 9. There's no way you can do this with multiplication because it just replicates the list a number of times. So you really can't do this thing using list multiplication. And also one more thing that I want to point out, even though I said that in this case, if you want to have a list that just kind of replicated a number of times, list multiplication is the same as list comprehension. There is a difference. So in this case, these two are only equivalent if this type in the element, this expression here, it's an immutable type. Okay, immutable types, if you remember, they're like integers, strings, etc. Okay. Now, if you actually have other mutable types in the expression, for example, you created an instance of car in the list of comprehension versus just creating a single car in a list and multiply it 10 times, they end up being different, although at first glance they do the same thing. This is a topic that we'll cover in 3B, should be covered in 3B, but I just want to point it out here because I don't want you to think that this is always equivalent, because there are cases where they're not. Why they're not, again, 3B should go into more details on that. So this is optional. This part is optional. You don't have to know it, but I just want to point it out. All right, I think that's the end of this video.